So, if you were not here last week, I had a great story to tell of how my computer fell ill just before I had to write my sermon. And because that was the first Sunday of the fall, an important Sunday, of course, that really bothered me. And I ended up writing bits and pieces on pieces of paper, iPhones, other computers. I'm here to tell you that my computer will be discharged from the hospital today. But you'll notice I said today, which meant I had yet another week in which the sermon composing process was conducted in between the tasks. I had to do it on more pieces of paper, spare electronic equipment, and between keeping an eye on all the art coming in. It was like a carpenter shop in here for 3 days. And then we're expanding the Wi-Fi, and people were coming saying, do you want it over here or do you want it over there? And then there were 3 community events, including a reception for our Art Prize artists and pastoral visits that you probably can imagine. I did a wedding, as you heard, and then there were the 15 other appointments that don't fall into those. In short, this week's sermon, which should be the most important thing I do, is about as well prepared as last week's sermon. Probably less. The good news is we all survived that one. And I have a simple message, a really simple message this morning, and the question is, will I do it justice? And that's why I always need your help. Therefore, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. And so the word of God came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim against it, for their wickedness is before me. But Jonah rose up and went to Tarshish, away from God. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish and went down inside it to go with them. 2 days before my 19th birthday, in February of 1972, the day was Groundhog Day. That's never a good day. I received my lottery number. If you are of a certain age or older, you remember when the only legal lottery was the draft lottery. There were no millions to be made by getting the right number. There were lives to be lost. Men over 18 were subject to conscription. I was over 18. The draft called us all up randomly by birthday in a process that began in your 19th year, and then you were summoned in your 20th year. In 1972, they called up young men with numbers up to about 180, about half a year's worth. On February 2nd, all of us were sitting in the cafeteria at university with radios, transistor radios, listening hard. When we got our numbers, we posted them on our room doors. Mine was 65. I was scared, deeply, profoundly frightened. My lifelong struggle with insomnia began that very night and followed me for several nights thereafter. My mother, on the east side of the state at that time, eyed the Detroit River with new awareness of what lay on the other side. Canada, for those who don't know. That fall, I received my pre-induction notice which required that you report to a local installation to get a physical, mental, and moral exam. I appeared at Fort Wayne in Detroit early one morning to join others on what we called in those days the Group W bench. And the meagerness of that laughter tells me you have all forgotten about Arlo Guthrie and his wonderful satirical song about the draft called Alice's Restaurant, in which all moral reprobates are assigned to the Group W bench. I passed all my exams. I got an A from the selective service, a grade I was not seeking at all. And for a few awful weeks wondered what I would do. Should I claim to be a conscientious objector? In all honesty, I only conscientiously objected to being shot. This is not a good enough reason. Should I actually enlist, which allowed you to choose which service you could serve in, but you would serve longer than the draftees 2 years? Should I take that bus across the river to Windsor and take up residence in Canada? Or should I just accept my fate? My wait was mercifully short because in January of 1973, Melvin Laird, then Secretary of Defense, announced that the government was canceling all inductions effective February 1st. I no longer had to decide. Now, do you see the connection between the story of Jonah and the story of me? We both faced a choice we did not wish to make, a forced choice. And Jonah, not having Melvin Laird to spare him, became essentially a draft dodger. He was told to report to Nineveh. That's up there in the northeast if you're in Israel. And instead he went that way, down to the river, actually down to the ocean, to Joppa. You can see him now prowling around the coast saying, anybody here going to Tarshish? I can pay for it. Do you know where Tarshish is? It's reputed to be on the coast of Spain. He didn't have to cross a river, he had to cross an ocean. Of course, he was found out. There was a storm. The sailors finally figured out Jonah was the cause, and they hurled him overboard at his own request, at which point he was swallowed by a dag gadol, a great fish. And we think of that as perhaps his punishment, but in reality, God was saving him from being drowned. Have you ever been in a situation where your salvation was almost as unpleasant as your alternative fate? Think about being inside a great fish for 3 days. It's moist and smelly and dark. If he had fallen in the ocean, he would have died. If you were Jonah, you were now wondering if you were going to be dinner. But the point is that he paid for his defiance of duty. Last week, my message was about how we all belong. Every one of us has a right to be here in this church, whether you're here for the first time, whether you've been here for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or more years. But more than the church, we believe everyone has a right to be in the world. The heart of a liberal faith, and I distinguish the heart from the brain, the heart of liberal religion is the moral and spiritual equality of every person. However different we are, and we are marvelously different, those differences do not divide us into one kind of person and another. We are not English speakers and Bosnian speakers. We are not Christians and Muslims. We are not Americans or Malaysians. We are not male and female. We are not gay or straight. We are not rich or poor. We are not upper or lower class. We are not black or white or anything in between. We are not our culture. We are not our ability or our age. We are people in many varieties. And the ways that we construct these differences are what the preacher A. Powell Davies called foolish walls. He writes, "The years of all of us are short. Our lives are precarious. Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do the little we might. Yet we find time for bitterness, petty treason, and evasion. He speaketh the truth, does he not?" How many of us have found ourselves using up our days doing nonsense and getting even with others for doing the same? How strange and foolish are the walls that divide us, he writes. We know it's true, and yet we continue to do it. And we here, not just us, and others like us, of course, imperfectly, but I think wholeheartedly, want to become at least one place where everyone belongs. A place that Isaiah called a house of prayer for all people. Yes, we are far from being that. We can look around and say the world is not nearly as white as we are, nor as rich, nor as American, but we believe in that hope. That is why we are here. And some can call us foolish and naive for thinking it's possible to create a community without walls or divisions or definitions. They can call us foolish and naive all they want because we think the walls that do exist are even more foolish.